Okay, we're doing Eros and the internet. And this is going to get kind of frank in a way because I'm going to use the word masturbation. And people just going to have to accept the fact. But I'm going to come at this a little bit different. And I intend to be very instructive to men and also to sort of unveil some spiritual secrets, you might say. They're not really secret. You can read stuff that talk about this. Remember I talked about the fourfold structure. And we had the ego, or I, or warmth body, which is also the spirit. Then you have the desire, or astral body, which is also the soul. And then from the fourfold thing, you have the ethereal life forces body, and then the physical, or material body. And of course, we live in a culture in which the spiritual elements that we're talking about here are thought not to exist at all. But it isn't that they don't exist, it's that they're right in front of everybody's face. All you got to do is look at the right phenomenon, you know. And if you want to get into this from a standpoint of medicine, there's a book I recommend. I'm not going to get into it so much here, but in the On Becoming a Real Wizard website, where I talk about acquiring wisdom and also spend a lot of time talking about books that one can have. And when I do some work on health, I'm going to recommend a book called The Fourfold Path to Healing by Dr. Tom Cowan. And you'll find discussions of this four-body structure and also why the healer, if he wants to recognize the spiritual in the human being, pays attention to these four bodies. Okay. Now we have some sense of the desire situation, and also, you know, I talked about the desire or astral body, and also the ethereal life forces body. That's what we're going to talk about now, which is sort of the soul. And the reason we're going to talk about this is I want to relate it to masturbation. Okay. Now, female masturbation is different from male masturbation, but both are directed at achieving an orgasm. All right. The man does something which is gives up his seed, however. That is, there's ejaculation, and the accumulation of seed in his body is spent. And when he makes love wearing a rubber or not wearing a rubber, and he's inside a woman, he spends his seed. And athletes know, and lots of other people know, that when this happens, there's a loss of vitality. I remember a little bit ago we were talking about men aging and wanting to maintain their vigor. You know, or at least thinking they should maintain their vigor. And of course, men produce less seed when they're older and more seed when they're younger. All right. Now, what happens psychologically in the invisible bodies when young boys learn to masturbate? And there's lots of cultures which sort of frown on this. They try to interfere it. They don't want to. There's an instinct that this is maybe not a good thing, that a boy should engage in onoism. And of course, during the sexual revolution that started in the 50s and then expanded in the 60s and the 70s and became all these other things, one of the aspects of the sexual revolution was everything's okay. Well, it's not a question about everything being okay or not okay. It's about understanding consequences. Okay? When the man spends his seed, he suffers a loss of vitality. And the older he gets, the stronger this effect on him is. Now, why is that? Well, the reason is that what George Lucas called the force, and what's recognized in certain areas of spiritual insight as the etheric or life forces body, is a force of vitality or for life, and it's real. And in the human being, this psychic force, if you want to call it that, is stored like something like what a battery does, as a kind of energy in two places, in the blood and in the seed. Okay, now a woman is different because of the way eggs are produced, and that's sort of a whole other problem, and it's useful to understand that. But what happens when a young boy starts to learn to masturbate? Well, when he releases his seed, he also releases this vital energy. It's now no longer contained within his organism. It's in the seed, wherever he spilled it, whether he, made a mess in his sheets or in a sock or whatever it is that he did, there it is, it's out there. And whether it's in a rubber or whatever, it's out there. It's no longer inside his body. And it's no longer part of the organism of his life force's body. Okay? Does it just sort of radiate into the air? Well, no, it doesn't, because the world is a place in which there are spiritual realities, and one of the spiritual realities is that there are other beings. And if you want to get into this, here we have on TV this summer a show called The Gates, and one of the people on the TV on The Gates is supposed to be a succubus, and you can look up incubus and succubus on the internet, and you can find the old Middle Ages idea of these invisible beings, and they take the life force out of men and women. And of course, these were told as horror stories, and of course it becomes a big boogeyman. It becomes way bigger than it is. But the fact is in the astral or desire body of the human being, we create things that can be called egregores, or psychic parasites. And one of the ways that we're more familiar with this is when we talk about addictions and alcoholism. Part of the astral body separates off from the ability of the ego or the warmth body to control it. It becomes a kind of independent entity. Rudolf Steiner, in one of his lectures, called these beings cancers of the soul. And we know that cancer is, in a material sense, is independent of the physical organism. It's a growth that won't obey the organism's general overall intelligence or wisdom. It gets outside that. And in a similar kind of way, when we engage in repetitive acts, there's a psychological consequence that occurs in the astral or desire body, and sometimes connected to the ethereal or life forces body. And something becomes independent. And let me stop and go on to the next section, because I don't want to do this without that.